Welcome to Shark Tank Performance Lab. This is an episode 2, Cannabis and Athletic Performance. Today, I would like to present you with a very interesting and actual topic that from my perspective was never sufficiently dealt with. A quality, comprehensive review of all the aspects of cannabis use as an athlete was absent until this day. Cannabis has been noted to be second most consumed recreational substance next to alcohol. There's evidence of its use among human cultures since antique times. With a growing cultural acceptance and the diminished social stigma, better accessibility, as well as worldwide tendencies to legalize and decriminalize marijuana, it's no surprise that many athletes nowadays admit to using cannabis. Some even include the THC-containing products in their training regimes as they believe it brings positive effects on the overall performance. So, recent meta-analysis, that's analysis of the selection of various studies representing over 46,000 athletes of varying age and ability, suggests that around 23% have used some form of cannabis in the past year. That means almost 1 in 4, so check up how the numbers look like in your gym. With this growing popularity, the need for knowledge of how does it influence athletic performance emerged. So yet, that this aspect of cannabis use is nowadays still understudied and in dire need for more exploration, and unbiased, good quality evidence is lacking. You may have seen some articles on popular sports science or combat sports internet portals, but usually they were either lacking depth or throughout research or just full of bro science. Hereby, I aim to close this gap. I analyzed for you 16 most recent research papers that widely analyze the topic of cannabis use in sports and its influence of athletic performance. All of them combined source more than 300 papers altogether. There are different cannabinoids within cannabis itself, so there is THC, CBD, those being the most known and examined, and all of them having some particular properties, and I will also cover that in this episode. So, whether you're completely against it, or just take some 2 puffs before bed, or you're just a Friday smoker or total stoner head agitator, here I present you with the best actual scientific evidence to date, so you can be fully informed on all pros and cons of marijuana use as an athlete. Before we start to talk about marijuana itself, I would like to talk a little about why is it hard to conduct good quality studies. As with every controlled substance, after years of aggressive propaganda against it, there is some amount of stigma attached to it. Compare it, for example, to the history of psilocybin research, which is now emerging as one of the promising substances in psychiatry. The number of participants in human studies were usually quite small, like mostly under 100. It's small, like for medical research. And there are many objective problems about conducting the studies, while we also have to stay true to scientific regime. For example, how to standardize the intake, like blunt, with or without tobacco, like how to standardize the amounts of each. There are different ways of intake. You can smoke, you can vape, you can eat edibles. You can have different strains, you can have different ratio of THC to CBD, sativa, indica. There's also influence of other cannabinoids, so-called entourage effect. That means the other cannabinoids influence the effect of other cannabinoids within cannabis itself. So there is a question how to measure certain things, like how to get certain psychological parameters undisturbed, how to standardize some performance tests, and how to account for athletes performing tests under influence. Like, imagine that. So, how to scale some more abstract things like mind state, relaxation, recovery. These are all the problems that contemporary scientists face. If you're interested in knowing more about how science works, stay tuned. The podcast about that is coming soon. So now let's talk about what does actually cannabis contain and how it works. And what is cannabis? Cannabis is nice looking, fun smelling flowering plant that's native to some mountainous regions of Eastern Asia. Due to variety of useful properties, it became cosmopolitan, it's accessible almost everywhere. It is known to humanity probably since the earliest beginnings of our civilization, and it's present in earliest recorded history. It's been used as a source for industrial fibers, oil, food, medicine, and, of course, spiritual and recreational purpose. Its application in official medicine is currently undergoing an extensive research. There are few known cannabis strains that differ with the concentrations and ratios of chemical compounds, as well as some morphological features, size and looks by that. So we have Cannabis sativa, we have Cannabis indica, and Cannabis ruderalis. The last one has a very low concentration of psychoactive components, so it has little relevance for us. Cannabis contains more than 500 various chemical compounds. More than 100 of them are responsible for the characteristic aroma, and more than other 100 are so-called cannabinoids. Cannabinoids are the molecules that give the cannabis its psychoactive properties. So, cannabinoid system in humans. We have something called cannabinoid system in our bodies. It consists mainly of two different so-called receptors, like we have CB1, CB2. So what are receptors? The receptors are special proteins that exist in the cell membranes, and when the suitable fitting substance connects to them, the whole cascade of chemical events happen. Receptors CB1 are present mainly in brain, fat tissue, muscles, liver, and some other organs. The CB2 are expressed on the cells of the immunological system. That's quite important fact. This is the one responsible for our defense, like white blood cells, and so on. The cannabinoid system exists not only to receive our God-sent weed, it's reacting to so-called endocannabinoids that are produced by our own body. They have a very important function, and this function is fine-tuning of virtually every physiological process in our body. And also, the endocannabinoids are so-called the feel-good substances. They are released after a physical exertion, muscle pain, or massage. And they might be responsible also for so-called runner's high. So it might be the answer why training of BJJ feels so good. I wrote an article about endocannabinoids, and there will be for sure a podcast episode coming about it, and endorphins as well in the future. So let's get to the overview of cannabinoids. The most known, most interesting, and the ones that are present in the biggest concentrations are THC, CBD, and CBN. THC stands for tetrahydrocannabinol, CBD, cannabidiol, and CBN, cannabinol. It is not really known why the plants develop those compounds. It's believed that it might have protected them from insects or maybe ultraviolet radiation. There are enough resources already online that deal extensively with the exact precise effects of those substances, so I will keep myself brief here, but I think it's good to get some summary of them. So THC is responsible for the classic effects of the cannabis intoxication, like this high, altered state of consciousness, euphoria, relaxation, anxiety sometimes, increased sensuality, creativity, appetite stimulation, to name the few. So then we have a CBD. It's known for its anti-anxiety, antipsychotic, anti-seizure, anti-inflammatory, and potentially pain-relieving properties. And CBD does not induce psychoactive effects. We also have CBN, which is only a mild psychedelic. It's binding weakly to the cannabinoid receptors in the body, mostly to the CB2s, which again, I repeat, they are present on the immunological cells. So it has this property of being anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, and works also mildly anxiolytic, like relieving the fear response. So interestingly, with some time, the THC in marijuana gets transformed to CBN, meaning the weed will lose some of its psychedelic potency and will become potentially more calming, more anti-inflammatory. So finally we get to the core of this podcast episode. So the potential benefits of cannabis in sports. What do we know about influence of generally meant sports performance? So it might be a little disappointing, but the up-to-date systematic reviews and single studies reveal that cannabis and THC tend to show null or slightly negative effects on strength and aerobic activities. Those results come from small groups and are sometimes even contradictory, like some show negative effects, some show positive effects, some show no effect. So any conclusive evidence right now on their ergogenic or ergolytic potential is still lacking. But as for now, there is no strong signal that it might reliably influence performance parameters. And what those studies actually measured? They measured like cardiovascular parameters like heart rate, resting heart rate, blood pressure, maximum heart rate, and VO2 max, like maximum possible oxygen uptake, peak power, some lung physiological parameters, grip strength, plank times, 1 rep max, RPE, so rate of perceived exhaustion. So all of this was measured, and it's a little disappointing that they didn't really find any conclusive evidence. And also, they were considering the difference between chronic and single uses. As one article sadly stated, there appears to be no reason, based on current data, to believe that cannabis has any significant ergogenic, meaning performance-enhancing, effect. There was also no evidence of ergolytic, performance-reducing effect in chronic users, like with average use of 1.6 till 1.8 blunt a day. Check the reference studies for more details. As usual, you can check the transcription of the podcast episode on sharktankmd.com under episode 2, Cannabis and Athletic Performance. So the next effect that was hoped to be influenced by cannabis is assistance in recovery, pain, and sleep. The whole science of recovery after physical exercise is a whole complex world with many nuances. CBD or THC use have been suggested to play a role in pain management, inflammation, and sleep, which are the hallmarks for recovery from exercise. As it is hard and costly to measure the effect of recovery, which is quite a good topic for future articles, we have to rely on subjective surveys and indirect data. Numerous articles, including those in combat sports, report using cannabis for pain management, finding it effective in reducing chronic pain, inflammation associated with long-term injuries. Specific studies highlight and have already proven CBD's anti-inflammatory properties, so it could be a valuable tool in athletes' recovery regimen. This aspect is particularly relevant in martial arts when chronic joint and chronic muscle pains are significant. The endocannabinoid system in regulating mood and stress is also quite well documented, with cannabinoids like CBD showing some promise in reducing anxiety and stress levels. This is especially important for athletes facing big pressure of competition, where anxiety can really effectively impair their performance. So those cannabis anxiolytic effects may help them maintain composure and focus, and thus enhance their performance in high-pressure situations. There is also some research linking cannabis to improved sleep cycles, and it shows the importance of rest in an athlete's performance and recovery. So deep restorative sleep is crucial for muscle recovery, and cannabinoids have been shown to help make your sleep longer and more restful. So for martial artists who often undergo intense training regimes, the potential sleep-enhancing effects of cannabis could really impact recovery and performance. In one survey study, a significant majority of participants, 93%, believe that CBD use contributes positively to their exercise and recovery efforts. And 87%, so almost 90%, report similar benefits from THC use. So these findings suggest that individuals who regularly use cannabis, whether CBD or THC, and actively participate in exercise, perceive that cannabis plays a beneficial role in aiding their recovery post-exercise. What about flow state? So there is some anecdotal evidence and preliminary studies suggest that cannabis may help some athletes achieve a so-called flow state. It's a state, well, the definition, I think it's not yet quite precise up to date, but it's a state marked by increased creativity, heightened focus, and improved performance fluidity. So this is a state of immersive concentration, almost like hyperfocus, and it can be particularly beneficial in martial arts, where this creativity and technique execution are very important. So, bottom line, the anti-inflammatory, pain-relieving, sleep-enhancing, and psychomimetic effects of cannabis are already proven and well documented. However, the subtle, subjective effects on the overall recovery and its potentially positive influence of overall performance may not be detectable using the standard scientific method, which again means we need more research and we need bigger groups and better methods. We need also some mention of potential drawbacks and health concerns. So, of course, as you can imagine, smoking marijuana and pulmonary function might be something of concern. So, marijuana smoke contains many of the same substances as tobacco smoke, but it is unclear whether smoking marijuana causes the same pulmonary damage or similar that's caused by tobacco. Prior studies of marijuana smokers have demonstrated consistent evidence of airway mucosal injury and inflammation, which means that the patients had this respiratory symptoms like as cough, enhanced phlegm production, and wheeze similar to tobacco smokers. I ran across a quite interesting study. It's called CARDIA study, the coronary artery risk development in young adults. And this is a study that collected repeated measures of tobacco and marijuana smoking, as well as pulmonary function over 20 years in more than 5,000 study participants. So this is a quite good number. The scientists estimated both current intensity and lifetime cumulative exposure to tobacco and marijuana smoking and analyzed their associations with measures of pulmonary function over this 20 years of follow-up. So the results for tobacco smokers, the results were quite unsurprising, with a gradual decline of pulmonary function over years. With marijuana smokers, on the other hand, there was an actual increase in lung parameter within first years, so the lung parameters got better, with noticeable leveling out and gradual decrease after 7 so-called joint years of cumulative exposure. We need to also talk a little about cancer risk. So as for current knowledge, there is no much evidence that cannabinoids itself can cause cancer in humans. There were some signals that cannabis actually could be carcinogenic, but there are methodological limitations in those studies, making it difficult to interpret and establish a direct and convincing link between cannabis and cancer risk. Of course, the cannabis smoke is generally recognized as carcinogen, the smoke itself, I mean, so it contains many of the substances that a cigarette smoke has. The literature reviews and experts' council statements are contradictory on this point. Again, there is a lack of quality evidence, so it is also to be noted that marijuana is often consumed together with tobacco. So my interpretation of the available data is that it's safer to assume that certain cancer risk is there. One last sentence about marijuana use and mental health and dependence. So cannabis use has been consistently associated with some mental health disorders. A lot of research is showing up now. Heavy cannabis use has been associated with 4 times increased risk of psychosis and also increased odds of developing depressive and anxiety disorders. So 22% of people who use cannabis, like 1 in 4, 1 in 5, will or are estimated to meet the criteria for cannabis use disorder, like meaning addiction. All of those effects are dosage and potency dependent, meaning the higher the THC concentration, the worse the outcome. Also, mind the fact that in the USA and Europe, the concentration of THC has more than doubled over the past 10 years. We observe a rapid development of cannabis products with higher potencies than earlier products, such as concentrated extracts, so it's simply not the same mild weed your hippie parents were smoking back in the days. So the stuff is getting more and more hardcore and intoxicating. All the above come from the views of 20 studies with almost 120,000 participants, meaning the data is quite robust and can be trusted. There is also some evidence on negative influence of memory and intelligence in chronic smokers, which exceeds the scope of this article, so further reading is recommended. Check the sources. The whole different world is the current stance of major sports organizations on cannabis use. In regards to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and grappling, some events already introduced anti-doping testing, at least to some extent. This whole discussion is really complex and the policies are really different to navigate through. If you're really interested, if you want a deep dive about the stance, like check out my transcript, check out the article on the sharktankmd.com, which go a little in depth about this topic. As the testing is not yet widespread in BJJ competition world as for now, unless competing at high profile organizations, the cannabis users can puff stress-free. Conclusion: I hope the amount of information didn't overwhelm you, as it did to me when I was preparing this article and reading the research. As you see, there is no hard data that would allow us to univocally say pro or against using it in sports. It's clear that while there are potential benefits, there are also significant concerns and unknowns. I think the strongest data right now suggests that the biggest utility and biggest potential lays in the application in recovery, as a recovery aid. The choice is, as in life, always yours. Now at least you have the best possible knowledge, and I hope I helped. Let me know if you like this podcast. Write down any questions. Do not hesitate to contact me in any case. Help to spread the word and share. Thank you.